Welcome back to the Business Simple podcast. I have a very special guest with me, Andrew Nicol from Opes Partners. Obviously, Opes Partners is a very reputable business on its own. When I was doing some research on Andrew before, I found out you bought your first house at 19. Still, obviously, involved in property investment. You're a host of the Property Academy podcast, which is the third-ranked business podcast in New Zealand.
Well, hang on a minute. I think that's today.
Today.
Normally we're second. We fight it out with Diary of a CEO, but Francis Cook has pipped us at the post this week.
Yeah, well, that was what I was going to reference. I was going to say there's against some pretty reputable competition.
Yeah, Diary of a CEO. They seem to hold that first place pretty well.
Yeah, so they're second today.
Yeah.
Making
Francis
sense.
Cook cooked the books. They seem to put money. They must put money behind it. That's what I'm telling myself.
Yeah.
Anyway. They must put money behind it, and then they seem to jump up the ranks, and then they drop behind. But bit of controversy with hers apparently. So she's now been turfed out and is telling people not to listen to Cook the books. And I believe there's maybe some lawsuits coming. I'm not sure. I can't say that. I think there's some stuff to follow. That's what I heard anyway.
Yeah, right. Okay, interesting. Well, anyway, third against some pretty serious competition, and obviously, if it was a property-based segment, you would be winning that by a landslide. Also, I saw like 500 reviews on your podcast. You're at 1,700 and something episodes.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Actually, 1880, I think we recorded this week. Yeah.
Wow. So we'll touch a little bit more on that, but thanks so much. I know your schedule's hectic, so thank you for coming in.
That's okay. Really day off today.
Day off.
Yeah.
Making the most of it.
Yeah.
Making the most of it. So look, the purpose of this podcast is essentially to take people who are doing things that aren't normal, explain how they got there, and also just to humanize them a little bit. And something that surprised me a lot as I've been doing these episodes with some really intelligent people is a lot of their stories have been quite normal, and it's been really cool to hear some of the, obviously a lot of the stories have some pretty hectic periods, and anyone who's grown to a point like you have, or some of the other guests has had some challenges along the way. Usually our starting point is just kind of going through that process. It might even be a little bit before when you were 19. Where'd you go to school? What was it that made you want to invest in property so early? Was that the catalyst for then going on to being a professional in property, or was it professional first? I'm really keen to hear how everything started and what that journey was like.
Cool. So I started out probably when I was in high school. The biggest realization was that my parents didn't understand money and didn't have any money. So we grew up in Waltham at 321 Wilson's Road, which I later bought off my parents, and it was a 100-year-old property that I think had been passed down for a couple of generations in my family, and we were poor. And that the uncomfortableness of knowing that my parents were poor made me realise I didn't want to have the same worries about money that they had. And they worked really hard. Like they had 4 kids, mental. They had like 3 jobs between them, and they worked all hours. There were ships in the night, and they just basically wanted to focus on us being able to go to school and those kind of things. So I went to Middleton Grange, so my family are religious. I'm not, but I've made up for lost time after leaving the church many years ago. And basically when I was at school, I was an average student. I was good at maths, terrible at English and history. I was good at science, all those kind of things. Mm-hmm. And I realised that I was better with numbers than a lot of other people. So I thought, I'd probably get into something in kind of the financial space. But at that stage, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. And that's because before there was Suits, there was a show called Boston Legal, and it looked pretty fun, arguing all day. So I was going to leave high school and go to university. And I got a job offer from a bank. So I'd entered a competition where you as a collective assume the role of the Reserve Bank, and you have to set the OCR. And so you say, okay, well, should we put it up? Should we put it down or keep it the same? And how do you justify that? And we had to present that to a panel from the Reserve Bank. And so we entered that competition, and as part of that, I was getting a whole lot of information from Westpac. One of the branch managers said, why are you doing this? I told him about the competition. He said, hey, you should get into banking after you leave school. And I thought, actually, the best way to learn about money is to go work for a bank. And so that's what I did. I started working at the BNZ. I didn't like Westpac, despite them offering me a job at that time, because they just had terrible customer service. I I went and worked for BNZ for a couple of years and worked my way up there. I started as a teller, then a customer service person, then a personal banker, and then I kind of didn't know what direction I wanted to go in. So was it going to be a branch manager? Was it going to be in private banking, dealing with funds? Was it going to be a mobile mortgage manager? And during that part of my life, I met this guy who was a client of mine, I think, at one stage, and I met a guy who had a mortgage broking firm, and he said, come and be a mortgage broker. And I thought, yeah, I could get into that. And so I took a bit of a plunge. I was maybe 20 at the time, and was semi-self-employed, and I've pretty much never been employed since that day.
Yeah, nice. Probably pretty unemployable by now.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'd be fired within the first week, first day. And the way that Opes came about was what I'd started doing when I was about 18 is learning about property. And I realised that a whole lot of people who are really normal people, really normal incomes, were quite rich with property. So they bought properties, they'd done them up, or they just bought them and held on to them. And I had clients at the bank who were, maybe making the equivalent of like 50 grand a year at the moment, and they might own 5 rental properties. And I was like, holy hell, this is a great way to make money.
Yeah.
And so I started going along to like the Property Investors Association. We didn't have like a podcast. There were no podcasts to listen to back then. I'd get out books from the library, and I thought I could do this. And so I spoke to my friend Tony Mounts. He said, I'll get you pre-approved to buy a house. And I bought my first property with my girlfriend at the time. That was number 20 Buccleuch Street, just around the corner here. And that was the start of the journey.
And so has your strategy from the start, I've got a couple of things that come up through that I'm interested in, but you bought and sold your first one, if I'm correct?
Yeah, so the first one I bought, we bought it, we renovated it. Now, bear in mind, I don't have a practical bone in my body.
Yeah.
So we'd go in there and we'd paint it at night after. So I'd finish my job at the bank, it's about 7 o'clock. We'd pick up Thai takeaways, and then we'd go around there and we'd strip wallpaper and we'd paint the rooms. So we're doing only cosmetic stuff, very, very poorly, and we had no taste whatsoever. I can't believe Alice let me do this, but we painted a feature wall in every room, a different colour feature wall. So one room was red, one room was blue, one room was brown. It was disgusting.
Yeah.
And anyway, we got it to a point where we were like, oh yeah, this looks really cool now, and then we were going to rent it out. And I rang up a property manager, David Curtis, and he came round and he said, the place looks fine, sell it now, it'll break your heart. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, it's a shitty property in a shitty neighbourhood. It's always going to be shitty. It's going to attract the wrong tenants. Get rid of it. And I was like, well, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. I know what I'm talking about. So I rented it out myself. And I did it room by room. So for $80 a room, you could rent a bedroom. So we're getting $400 a week, and that was quite a good return on investment because we spent $230 on it or something like that, and or a couple of $100,000, and then the tenants were a pain in the ass. They would miss their rent. At one stage, I went over to do an inspection, and one of them was sleeping in the garage. They had people sleeping in the garage on the floor, and I was like, oh, this is just a nightmare. I should sell it. And so we ended up selling it. We didn't have the intention to sell it at the start, but then we were like, let's just get our money out and do something else. Yeah. And so we sold that property. I think we made like maybe a 15-20% return on our money. So we thought we were really, really good at that stage. Yeah. And then we started investing in other properties.
And in a video that I watched before this, you mentioned you delayed purchasing like a really nice home to live in for a long time and stayed focused on investment. Do you think that's an important part of if you're trying to build wealth through property?
I think that everyone's wired differently in terms of what they want to achieve. I wanted to achieve wealth, and so I was prepared to put my own personal needs aside and sacrifice a lot early on in life so I didn't have to do that later on. Because in life, you're going to sacrifice. It's either you sacrifice now or you sacrifice later. That's just the mathematics of it. So when are you going to do it? And so for me, I was, essentially single. Had a girlfriend, but then on again, off again with different relationships. I didn't have a family, so I was like, I didn't need a house to live in myself. I just want to make money. Yeah. So every property that I ever purchased was for a rental property, and I might have lived in it very, very short term. Like I might have moved in, done some renovations, then moved out. Yeah. But like maybe a month kind of thing. Yeah. And I kept renting. And then That just kind of worked for me.
Yeah.
Every property that I purchased, it was, is this a good investment? Can I make money off this? And so as a result, I would have transacted over 100 properties in my investing career, and never once did I buy a house to live in until I turned 36.
Yeah, right. Do you mind me asking how many you own at the moment?
40 something.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so you've held on to
But
a
bear
few
in
of them
mind,
as well.
I've changed out my portfolio quite a lot over the years.
Yep.
So in the original days of investing 20 years ago, I started buying old properties, renovating properties, and then renting them out. And then after the earthquakes in Christchurch, I started buying earthquake damaged properties, strengthening them, bringing them back to building code, and then renting them out. Now the problem with those type of properties is they require huge maintenance. So like I'd have like a 200 grand maintenance bill in a year. And it was just getting crippling. And then interest rates started going up, and then the government introduced interest deductibility rules. So I was like, this doesn't work anymore. So I started selling a lot of my old properties and replacing them with new, which is my business model. And nowadays, 20 years on in investing, I can afford the nicer properties now.
Yep.
So I've done my time with the grind. Now I can have a much easier, more passive investment. So I think people go through this transition of properties, and certainly over the last 5 years, as my time's become more precious and unavailable, I've had to change my strategy a lot.
Yeah, and I know this would vary massively like person to person, and you'll be able to probably explain this better as we go through what you guys do and how it works and who it's for and that sort of thing. But I find even being younger, being in a slightly different situation in terms of having a family and a little one and stuff like that, but I have no capacity I've done a couple of flips, I've bought some properties that have been rentals, I've had the same experience where I've bought shit stuff.
Yeah.
And then in shit areas, and I've rented it to shit people, and it's been awful. And the returns have actually been really good. And like the money that you make has been really good. But because it doesn't outweigh the amount of money that I can make doing my job, it's not really worth it. Like I think if I was stuck with a salary or something like that, it would be worth a little bit of extra pain over here.
Yeah.
And because of that, I've got 2 under construction at the moment that are like brand new.
Yep.
And that's my game moving
And
forwards.
you're, if I'm right, you're getting someone else to do that build for you. You're not involved in the build. You've just bought them off a developer.
Yep.
Really, really easy. So a much more straightforward way of investing. And I think you're right about kind of the mental bandwidth that it takes. So I know that there is some really good money to be made in renovating properties.
Yeah.
Do I have the mental capacity to do it? Not really.
Yeah.
And also, do I want to be taking away from my own personal life? Definitely not. And there's only ever so much money that you can possibly spend as well. So I'm like, if I made another 50 grand doing this flip, but it meant that I was quite stressed, is it worth it? No, definitely not. And nowadays I have to be laser focused when it comes to growing my business.
Yeah.
And I can't afford those kind of distractions.
Yeah. And do you know, it was, funnily enough, it was something that accidentally happened because all of my buddies are flippers. Like it's just the way that it's worked, being a little bit younger and stuff like that. I mean, straight after you doing an interview with a guy who just flips property. Like that's what he does. And Matt Perks and all those guys. And they're exceptionally good at it, and they just have like a tolerance for the pain, but it's also all they do.
They've got skills, right? So
Yeah.
those guys can do stuff themselves. Now, I'm useless with a hammer. I don't imagine you're much better.
Nah.
You're probably somewhat better, but not much better.
Not much.
And so, if you get it wrong, the worst case scenario where you lift up a floorboard. See, I don't even know what the hell I'm talking about. You lift up a floorboard and you discover there's rot. Those guys can fix it relatively cheaply. You and I are going to have to go and employ a builder to go and fix it. And then, surely we get the suit tax on top of that because we don't know what the fuck we're talking about.
Yeah, it is like that. It was sort of an accident because Jen, my fiance, she bought a house up in Auckland, brand new, in a developing area just between sort of Auckland and Hamilton, real cheap. And she had to move down because she was pregnant, and we were doing the long distance thing at the time. So she's like, "I'm not going to settle this house," and I was like, "Well, we have to settle it. That's not, actually
Otherwise
how
you
it
get
works."
sued.
That's
Yeah.
actually how it works. You can't just wipe your hands of it and walk off. And so we settled it, and we waited for a few months because we didn't know what we were going to do. We didn't know whether we were going to sell it. We didn't know whether we were going to keep it. We tenanted it out. We haven't heard a thing for 12 months.
Great.
I was chasing rent every week with my past tenants and things like that. And so it was just, is the return shit? Yes. But it's not that bad, and interest rates are coming down. All of a sudden, it starts paying for itself out of nowhere, and then you just have no worries. It's not that I need the extra cash flow. I just don't want it to cost me a whole bunch of money. And to be fair, we're probably negatively geared by about $400 a week this year. We're just lucky we're in a position where we could kind of handle that without it affecting our lifestyle too much. But we're in too deep now to sell it at this point. We may as well have done the pain. We may as well go out the other side. And it hasn't affected our appetite for it. We've bought another one that's an investment. We're building a brand new one to move into. We're still doing it a little bit. We definitely haven't blown the budget out with what we're building. It'll be nice, but it's not extravagant by any stretch. But that was sort of more just being able to buy it at a time where there were deals. Like land was cheap, building was cheap. We have relationships with builders through the work that we do that we can lean on. That means we get it even cheaper than what we already thought was cheap. Like we've been a little bit more like that about it. It's been cool.
It's an interesting market at the moment because it's a buyer's market, right? If you're a buyer in this market, you're getting a good deal. But the cash flow is going to suck, whether it's your own house or a rental property. And like you said before, you're topping up $400 a week. That's pretty normal at the moment. If you're actually calculating all costs and you're factoring in maintenance and vacancy, the stuff that will happen in the future, but you're paying for it today, you will be negatively geared if you're borrowing 100%. The only way of fixing it is tip in more money. So I like to use the bank's money as much as possible, and then I'm happy to pay a top up per week. But it's funny because I feel like because we've had such low interest rates, people hate the idea of topping something up. But I'm like, well, what kind of investment do you get where you don't have to put any money in? That doesn't exist.
That was exactly what I was just going to say when you said that. Is I remember, because we've obviously been doing property ads for a while now, and before that mad bull rush that we had, I remember advertising being able to buy a property for $100 a week.
Yeah,
that was a selling point.
Yeah, and that was as the interest rates were coming up as well.
Yeah.
There was a time where you'd buy something in Christchurch and it would make you $26 a week. It's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
But then, of course, the interest rates go the other way. And so that's where people have got to be realistic when they're setting their budgets, but also knowing what their tolerance is to a top-up.
Yeah.
Because if you get it wrong, you're probably going to sell in a market like this when interest rates are high and it's a buyer's market, and you will lose money.
Yeah.
Or at least you'll lose potential money in the future as well. If you've owned a property for 15 years and you're being punished by rates, now, you're still going to make money when you sell it. You're very unlikely to lose money. But if you bought at the peak of the market, like a lot of people did, including myself, and then interest rates have skyrocketed, your value's probably gone down, now you're topping up something that's going backwards. You've really got to know what your risk appetite is, because if you freak out and shit the bed, you're selling that property and you're losing money, and then someone else makes money along the way. Having said that, it is a great time to buy because we're a buyer's market. But the interesting thing is the psychology of people, when we get to that perfect market that people have said that they're waiting for, they're scared to invest. Because they're like, interest rates are high, developers are going bust at the moment, construction companies going bust. What the hell's going on? But that's when you should be buying. But that's not how we work a lot of the time.
Yeah. And it is that thing, right? Like when everyone's piling into the market, there's sort of like a person that never acts, that sits in there. I don't want to do anything when everyone else is doing it. I'm going to wait for costs to come down, and then costs come down. They're like, I'm going to wait for costs to keep coming down, and then costs keep coming down. And they're like, I'm going to wait more, and then costs start going back up again. And they're like, and then the market starts piling in, interest rates come down. They're like, I don't want to be involved. Everyone's in the market right now. It's too
absolutely. If you want to find a reason not to do something, you'll always find a reason. But if you want to actually back yourself, that's how successful people get ahead, right? You trust your gut, and obviously you do some numbers. You don't just go out there and pick a property and go, oh, that feels okay. You do your numbers, but you've got to also back yourself.
Yeah, I also think people probably overestimate the worst case scenario and underestimate how potentially good it could be. And that skews their decision making.
It's human nature to worry way more about the worst case scenario and have that loss aversion rather than think about what the best case scenario is. And one of the interesting things that we do with clients that want to invest is we map out what their financial life looks like. So we say, okay, you're 30 today and you want to be able to stop working when you're 55. And right now you've got some money in KiwiSaver, but you can't access that at KiwiSaver. You've got some money in KiwiSaver, you can't access that at 55. You're not going to qualify qualify for the super because you'll be too young. You've got a little bit in crypto and you've got a rental property. So if you cash all that up and put it in the bank, you've got enough to live on 30 grand a year.
Yeah.
And people are like, oh, okay, well, I want to get 150 grand a year because I want to travel. I want to help my kids out. I want to do all those kind of things. So then, we give an option of, okay, well, if you invest this way, then you can achieve that target. Now, people worry about the things that can go wrong, and they forget about the fact that what's going to go wrong is if you don't invest, you're going to end up in a position where that's a certain outcome.
Yeah.
Like, if you keep doing what you do, that's certain. 30 grand a year is a certain outcome. Are you happy with that? Absolutely not.
I do that all the time with the guys. I'll be like, right, okay, so let's just go over our worst case scenario. Because they'll be hesitant around making a decision or something like that. And we'll go through it. And then I'm like, that sounds a lot like the scenario we're in right now. Because you think about making a change to go up and it's like, oh, what if people do this and this and this happens and clients leave and this happens? It's like, well, us not doing anything right now is causing all of those things to happen. So we take a gamble at better. Maybe we miss and we wind up exactly where we are right now, or we just sit here and suffer. I know what I would pick.
Yeah. We actually did a video recently, and it was one of the voiceover ones that the social media team bullied me into doing. And we were talking about the worst case scenario is everyone else is normal a lot of the time. So, for example, going out and being self-employed, it's more risky than just having a job, right?
Yeah.
But if I go out and I start a business and I absolutely cock it up, what's the worst case scenario? Well, close the business. I might have to rent a house if I've leveraged against my personal property. Okay. And then I go and get a job. I do the same thing that everyone else does until I can reshape myself and rise from the ashes. Yeah. Like, the worst case scenario is probably not that bad.
Yeah, I completely agree. I couldn't agree more. So, and you touched on like the social media videos and things like that. I like that you used the term social media team bully you into.
Oh, they're relentless.
Yeah. So you guys are, and I am a student of marketing. I love marketing. I'm passionate about marketing. We have always sat in a more performance-based model for marketing when it comes to our clients. That's changed, and we're more content-driven. And watching you guys and what you've done has been a part of what's influenced me to start thinking of things differently. How do you balance, because you're involved in the marketing, you're involved in the podcast, you still have a really big business to run, you still have to be a dad, you still have to do, what does a day look like? How are you spinning all these plays?
So I actually, a couple of years ago, when I had Eliza, I decided, right, I'm going to go off the tools and I'm just going to focus on growing this business. I'm not going to see customers anymore. Mm-hmm. And I did that for about a year. And when I say I did it for about a year, I did it really poorly. I kept seeing customers, but basically I just was a closed book. If you're an existing customer, you can still work with me. If you're new to the business, you work with someone else.
Yep.
And I continue to balance that with the social media content, so the podcasts and the videos and the marketing direction and the show and all those kind of things. Now, I've got a great team around me for that. So I do a lot of the production. I'm involved in the production, but I'm not involved in a lot of the research. Yeah. So when we started the podcast 5 years ago, basically what we would do is every week we'd write down kind of 7 topics, and they'd be really basic. We'd talk about leverage, or we'd talk about split banking, we'd talk about interest rates, talk about the Auckland market, and then we'd go and do a little bit of research, or we'd get an article out of a newspaper. And then we'd sit there and we would record for about half an hour, and we'd figure out what parts worked, and we'd keep that and we'd cut the rest of it. Actually, to be fair, in the very early days, there was no editing. So don't go and listen to any of the early episodes. They're terrible. Where was I going with this? Oh, yeah. So in terms of nowadays, I will get my briefing sheets usually at the weekend. So I'll get 7 podcasts a week that I'll read through the notes. I'll make notes myself. I might go and research one thing and think, actually, that doesn't quite sound right. But a lot of the research is done by our team. And that's only because we've been fortunate enough to grow so much that we can afford to have a couple of journalists on staff, have people to be specifically dedicated to editing, all of those kind of things. So my involvement, while as a lot, it's nowhere near as much as it used to be. Sure. Now, after walking away from seeing clients other than my existing clients, I decided actually I hate this. I'm passionate about working with people. Yeah. That's what I'm good at because I love it so much. And so nowadays, I basically spend probably 60% of my week would be with customers.
Yeah.
Probably 30% of my week would be on content creation, and 10% of my week would be just kind of the running of the business. And I've got some great business partners, and we've got some great managers within the business. So not a lot of my touch is required to keep the wheels turning nowadays.
Nice, that's awesome. And obviously we've worked a little bit with some of the business partners and some of the JVs and stuff like that you've had. I'm going through a similar thing. So we're and this is just interesting, just completely going off script, but not that there's really a script, but just completely going all the way off to the side. I don't really do anything from an ads perspective anymore. I like seeing customers and things like that, but I love seeing customers, but I've not been involved in ads for probably 2 or 3 years. And I just sort of, when I was away last week, I was like, I don't actually want to not be involved in ads. Like, marketing strategy is my thing. And if you come to me and you're like, I need more leads and this is what I'm currently doing, I could probably solve it in about 30 seconds and you would at least be in a better and I'm like, that's a real skill. So I'm now back 16 hours a week in the delivery team working on the ad stuff just because I want to be. And there's something to be said for, like, you build these businesses. It's really hard to do. Doing what you want to do in them is pretty important, I think, as they get bigger and you're able to.
Yeah, I think when we started the company, you're kind of the jack of all trades. And even when Ed came on board about 6 years ago, he joked the other day that I set up his email footer. So I got his laptop and figured out what it was, typed it all in and saved it for him. Yeah. Right? We've got an IT team that do that nowadays. Yeah. And I can't do anything with IT myself nowadays. Yeah. But when you're growing a business, you've got to kind of just do everything and you've got to adapt. Yeah. As you get bigger, then you find that you put people in doing the jobs that you either don't want to do or it's not worth your time doing. So, for example, I've got an awesome EA. She's been with me for 7 years next week, 2 weeks from now. And put up with me for 7 years. Yeah. And she basically runs my life in terms of my time is I turn up, the notes on a customer are on my desk, I'll have my Zoom call with them, I'll make notes, and then she'll do all the emails and all of that stuff. So it's really effective use of my time because it's valuable. But also then it means that I'm more enthusiastic about doing my job. Yeah. Because when you're doing the shit that you don't enjoy, it's a grind, right? Yeah. So the last thing I want to do is emails at night. But for, say, 70% of my work life, I've gone home and from kind of 8 p.m. till about 1 a.m., I would type my emails or I type my notes and do all that stuff. So as you grow, you get the luxury of offloading some of that stuff. But what you don't want to do is be so detached from the business that you don't know what's going on. So again, I've got, there are 10 financial advisors that do what I do. They work with customers to buy investment properties. And when I wasn't as involved with customers, I couldn't give them as good advice when it came to coaching them because my finger wasn't on the pulse anymore. Yeah. I wasn't aware of the objections of the day. Mm-hmm. And also, when you've been doing it for so long, you've got an answer, like you said, 30 seconds, like you can come up with something like that. Yeah. Whereas it might take someone else an hour to do that. So you want to be able to empower these people by educating them on how you think and getting to the right answer. But again, you want to have your finger on the pulse in the business.
Sure. And so when we were kind of going through your story, we got right up until the becoming a mortgage broker piece. And I'm really interested in how long have you owned Opes for?
So I started 11 and a half years ago.
Yeah, sure. And so you mentioned, obviously, 6 years ago, you're still filling out email footers for people and doing things like that.
Yeah, to be fair, our growth has really only come in the last 5 years. Like it's really ramped up. We were doing okay. Yeah. We were just to kind of put it into perspective, we might have kind of done 100 property transactions a year, or maybe a slightly less. I think when he came on board, I think it was somewhere around 100 transactions a year, which is because you're dealing with a high ticket item. It's a high turnover, but there wasn't a lot of profit coming out the bottom. Yeah. But we were a small team at that stage. Where our business changed is when we changed our marketing philosophy. Yeah. So that I've been working with Marcus Sheridan over in America, who is amazing. And his whole philosophy is you think as a business you've got the secret sauce. Mm-hmm. You don't. Right? Even McDonald's secret sauce, you can go online and find out what the recipe is.
Yep.
And nowadays, people are so far through their buying journey before they engage with you.
Yep.
I think it's 90% of the way through their buying decision-making journey.
Yep.
So if you don't give people information to get to that 90%, they'll either do nothing or they'll use someone else.
Yeah.
And so Ed made me read the book They Ask You Answer in lockdown. I remember I listened to it on audible.com. So when I was traveling between where I was staying in lockdown and the supermarket, which was like a 30-minute drive, I'd listen to it. And I bashed through that. And the whole philosophy is tell everyone everything. And then they'll know that you're good at your job and that you're an expert, rather than try and keep it a secret and they have to come and engage with you to actually find out what the secret source is. And it makes you feel very uncomfortable doing that as a business owner. Because you suddenly start to think, well, what if my competitors find out what we're doing? What if people find out what we're doing and they just go and do it themselves? And so we kind of dabbled with it. I think we'd already started the podcast at this stage, but we really ramped up in terms of articles and in terms of videos and in terms of telling people everything, but more importantly, who we're right for and who we're wrong for. And what I realized the shift was, maybe a year later, is not only were we doing more transactions, so now we do probably 6 or 7 times, maybe even more, times transactions than we were doing back then. But people come in and they trust you. And they trust what you've got to say because you've told them everything. You've told them what you're making in a deal. You've told them how everything works. You've told them that they're not the right fit if they want to be a renovations investor, for example. And then you're also not wasting your time with those people because when you're desperate to do a deal, when you're only doing 80 transactions a year, you want to chase everyone and you want to convince them that your way is the way of doing it. That's not the right way to run a business. What you want to do is have it so that people come in and they're already advocates for you.
We've found, and I've gone through, we're sort of working on our own internal content thing, and obviously this podcast is a part of it, and there's lots of other things like that, but we've found that some of the, say through my personal branding work that I do, which is a product we sell a lot of now, I get messages on Instagram that are people that are like, hey, I've got this problem, can you please help me fix it? And it might be they have an agency currently and they aren't happy with the creatives, for example. And I'm like, yeah, of course we can help you fix that. And so that, like you said, they're already engaged with an agency, they're all those things, and you're like, where were those leads when we were just buying leads? And we have leads come through too that are like, there's a little bit more work involved. I'm not really involved in that work. My BDM does it. But those personal branding, content-driven leads, it's a completely different conversation. And like you said, they're advocates. They're going around. I mean, I had someone message me the other day being like, I just referred someone to come in and talk to you guys. I've never spoken to the guy.
That's
not
awesome.
once. It's off watching Instagram reels and listening to a podcast and shit like that. And you're like, how cool is being able to build a relationship with someone in a one-to-many fashion where they feel like it's one-to-one?
Yeah, and it's interesting because I would say at least a couple of times a month, Ed and I will be out somewhere. Someone will say, hey, you guys are the guys from the podcast. Thank you so much. You've made me rich. There was a guy in the airport the other day. I'm pretty sure he told Ed he'd bought 3 properties. Now, he hadn't bought them with us. He'd gone and done it himself. And a little part of you dies inside. And you're like, why didn't you use me? But actually, the reason I started Opes is I wanted to make people rich, right? If they don't do it with our services and make me a little bit richer, that's actually okay. We're doing okay. And as soon as you let go of the fact that you need to convert everyone to your way and you are true to what you're actually in business for, which for us is helping people be wealthier and make better investment decisions, then business comes your way.
And you've grown 700% over that period of time. It's just one of those ones where you can never clip every transaction. It's just how it works. And so understanding that the net positive is the thing to focus on.
Absolutely.
For sure. And so through that period of growth, and obviously you mentioned like you started listening to this book, and by the way, when I listened to the Ask Your Answer, I listened to it 3 times back to back.
You've got to read it a few times as well to really get really like get the most out of it.
It really challenges thought. So you listen to it the first time in COVID. We then go through a very buoyant market off the back of that.
Yeah, but actually we came out and it was kind of like a zombie apocalypse, right?
Yeah.
So I remember going back to the office. I can't even remember what the levels were at that stage, but you could kind of have small groups together. You could operate. But remember, the world was telling us that the property prices were going to drop by 40%.
Yeah.
And we didn't know. And actually, one of the things we did in COVID, which we've just carried on doing, was our webinars. So we were doing the podcast, and what we identified is that we were nervous. Like, what the hell was going to happen? Because there was no other event to compare it to in our mind, or certainly in my lifetime. What's going to happen when we get out of this? Are we even going to have a business? So the thing that we decided to do that I thought was important would be educate our customers so that they could navigate their way through it, because everyone was losing sleep, right?
Yeah.
So what we decided, okay, let's do a webinar. And we got like 100 people on there from our existing database. And I remember I was sitting at the dining room table of my batch over in Diamond Harbour, and no one had had a haircut. And we started our webinar journey. And we did them every single week in lockdown. I think we got through about 5 or 6 of them. And then we came out of lockdown and customers were engaging with us. Some people thought, okay, there's got to be an opportunity here. But one decision we made in that time was we weren't going to sign anyone on a property. We would get them pre-approved. We would educate them more, but we weren't going to take the risk that if we came out of this and the media was right, the market fell to shit, we weren't going to put people in a jeopardised position. And you can't do proper due diligence in lockdown. You can't go and look at the site or go and look at a property. So we made the decision to do no deals. We just got to a point, I reckon at that stage, we had some pretty tough times in business. Like I have paid staff using my credit card. I've cashed up gold to pay staff. I've made some pretty hard decisions to keep the wheels turning at times. And I remember I'd got to a point where Ollie, my business partner at the time, still my business partner, but he was the only business partner at the time, and I had just, like 2 weeks before, set ourselves up to pay ourselves a salary. First time ever in the business. And we're pretty happy about that. And we had 200 grand in the bank account, I reckon. And then we went into lockdown. And I was like, for fuck's sake.
There it goes.
How long can we last? But we put on a brave face. We had meetings with our staff every single morning. And we talk about, what's everyone experiencing at the moment. What are the customers saying that you're talking to? And we really leant into supporting our existing database and continuing their education base. And getting into those habits served us really well in the years to come.
Yeah, right. Interesting. And so then you guys are growing, I'm assuming, through this point anyway. Bit of a break. And so then we go into the momentum is forwards once everything balances out, and then it pulls backwards quite dramatically.
Then we have a massive market correction, right?
Yeah. And so have you found, first off, and this is just a hunch, have you found that because your marketing strategy is so content and relationship driven, you feel like you've been affected less by the market correction, or has it felt, do you feel the same for you as everyone else?
Oh, no. We in the worst year over that correction phase, I think we dropped back about 10%. Now, bear in mind, most developers that were dealing directly with the public dropped about 80%. Even more. Like I was reading in the newspaper yesterday that classic builders were down massively. Stonewood Homes, great example. On our webinar, we were talking about the stats. They've gone from like 900 transactions a year to 90 in terms of a number of consents. Like, that's scary. And dropping 10%, like, that was our profit basically. It wasn't fun, but we weren't laying staff off and we weren't thinking about closing offices. So we've been really proud that we've been able to keep all of our staff through this correction, because the challenge with staff is it takes people time to find their groove. And also, I, as an employer of 90-something staff, I'm really grateful for the time and dedication and loyalty that I get from my team. And so I feel it's my duty to make sure they're paid. And if I can't pay myself, but they've got to be paid, that's the decision I made to be self-employed.
I couldn't agree with that more. And so, I had this conversation with someone once, just sorry to cut you off, but he was essentially saying something to the tune of, well, I'm not making any money, so like I don't know what. And I was like, I get what you're trying to get at here, but the unfortunate thing about what you've signed up for when you started a business is that you no longer are entitled to fucking anything at any point in time. And you have an upside where if you go and have a screamer month, all your staff don't turn around and stick their hands out and go, hey, I want to be paid double because you made twice as much money last month. That's not how it works. But also when things pull back, like we didn't do that. It was the same thing. And I learned a lot about myself, I think, through that COVID period of time where I was like, I'm not paying you guys 80%. I was like, that's ridiculous. And I was like, the fact that the government even came out with a wage subsidy, which I thought was let's not get too political, but I thought made it easier on business for sure. There's some long-term pain that we'll all suffer as a result, but I thought it was easy, made it easier as a business. I was like, to take that and then only pass that on to your staff because you've stopped transacting the way that you were before. But when you're having screamer months, you're off at the pub with the boys fucking blowing money like it's going out of fashion. And I'm like, that's not what running a business is.
Yeah, and when you think about the fact that most people do live paycheck to paycheck, if they get an immediate 20% haircut on their salary, and I know we didn't have anything to spend our money on apart from like drones and I bought a magazine, dumb shit. You can't take away money from people that you're responsible for paying. I did, like, that just goes against everything I stand for. And so, you know, we've done everything we could to make sacrifices that we could to keep everyone employed so that when we came out the other end of it, we had loyal staff who believe in our brand and also give us so much back. Like, our team work tirelessly. We have a lot of fun in our office, but everyone in the business works really, really hard to achieve the greater good of growing the company.
Yeah, right. And obviously that's then reflected in the, you know, because I think a lot of the examples you used where say other companies have lost sales and things like that, a lot of them have also pulled back staff during that period of time. So they actually have less people trying to generate the sales. They have less, you know, time spent on their marketing. They have less all of that sort of stuff as a result. And so if you're in a position where you're able to hang on to that, we were the same. We haven't laid off anyone. We haven't done anything like that. We've been able to actually continue to grow top line through the last little bit. I think marketing sits in a weird spot where as a door shuts, i.e. a business reduces a budget or something like that, a door opens where someone goes, I'm going to change up my agency because they're not performing anymore, or something like that will happen. But it hasn't been cheap growth. That would be it's been extremely hard to do. But because of that, we've been able to actually add staff, grow, build out a senior leadership team, do a few things that are awesome, while other people appear to be pulling back a little bit or hurting.
Yeah, and the way I look at a business is nowadays I pay myself a salary from the company. Profit gets distributed as dividends when we choose to. But in the last 2 years, we've spent more money on developing the business and reinvested in the business than ever before. Probably in the last 2 years, we've spent more on development within the business than we have in the 9 years prior combined. Right. So, for example, one of the projects we're working on at the moment is a tech project, and we've now committed to $500,000 a year going to developing tech, because I want to make a more valuable business rather than sometimes business owners just want to strip every last dollar out of the business, which is great if you just want to create a lifestyle. I want to create a brand with longevity, a business with longevity, so that when I do say, okay, now I've done my part, and someone else becomes the custodian of that business, the business will still continue and it will thrive.
Yeah, and it will also be more valuable.
Absolutely.
Which suits you later on in life too.
That's crossed my mind.
Just in case you hadn't considered it. So I've got a bunch of other things I wanted to talk to you about. To be honest with you, a lot of them you've touched on naturally. One being how extremely capable your staff are. I think for me, what the connection I've made, and please realign me if I'm wrong, but the reason why your staff are so invested in your business and why they're so capable is because you spend time developing them and you're invested in them, and it sort of just comes backwards. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think we're very big on letting people grow, and eventually people grow and then they leave. Like you and I were talking about Jake before, who was an awesome asset to our firm for a number of years, and then he decided he was going to move over to sunnier shores in Australia, and we were all heartbroken. And you feel like, oh God, I can't believe he's leaving us. How can he leave us? But we're actually pleased when people grow into something even bigger than what they came in with. And take his sister Holly, who came in and would have thought SEO was a mix of a couple of Scrabble letters, right? Now this girl is like a master in SEO for our company. She's dedicated to the business. She works really, really hard. She's awesome.
Yeah. Knowing that whole family and obviously... and
they're all driven little fuckers, aren't they?
Mate, they're awesome. Because I mean, when Jake started working for me, because he went from us to you guys, he was working on a rail yard. Before he came in. Yeah, so he went from working on a rail yard to...
I love that.
And he was like, I can't even remember what I paid him when he first came in, but he basically came in for a job interview and was like, I understand that if anything, having me here will cost you money, so you can just pay me what you want.
What a great attitude.
Yeah, and I was like, who has that? Like, and Billy's coming in for a podcast after this. So
great.
And that was how I made the connection. But it's been really cool to see him grow and develop over the years. He's awesome. That is for me one of the most fulfilling parts of what we do is staff buying properties. Staff, I mean, it sucks when they move on. Like I've got Lily, she was probably almost 4 years she was here. But then like I'm seeing she's like on a holiday in America at the moment. She's gone on, she's doing this cool marketing. You're like, you're actually happy for them.
Yeah.
Really
absolutely. And we've had lots of people go and start businesses. Yeah. I mean, if they bring back slavery, I'll be all into locking them all down. But other than that, I'm proud of them.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. And so just touching on Opes specifically and what you guys do a little bit more. So you mentioned who you're for, who you're not for. Who's your target demographic? What do you do for them? How do you help them? How does it all work?
So it's funny because we actually did a bit of research of the people that have transacted with us in the last couple of years, and it's changed quite drastically. Yep. So when we started the company, my ideal client in my mind was a 40-year-old to, say, 55-year-old who have got a house, they've been paying down their mortgage, they've got a couple of kids, and now the kids are kind of starting to leave home a bit, they've got a bit more disposable income, and they're getting to that point in their life where they're like, holy shit, we're 10 years, 15 years away from retirement, and we've got like 50 grand in our KiwiSaver. We're fucked. Those were my target clients previously. As time's gone on and our business has evolved, we're dealing with a lot younger people as well. So we have a lot of clients who maybe are in their 20s, and there are some remarkable young people nowadays. I met with a couple yesterday. They're over in London now. They were based in New York. They sold, he built a business there and then sold it to a tech company over there for like $500,000 US. The kid's like 26. It's awesome. And now he's like, now I just want to put that money into investment properties because he's done the crypto dance and made nothing out of it. And so we are getting a lot of younger people, and I think part of that is because of how we engage with people now, the podcast, because generally speaking, they tend to be younger listeners. Now, we're doing a lot more work on YouTube now because we do want to still capture those traditional customers of ours, and we're doing a whole lot more just print media, so newspapers and stuff like that. We bought the magazine, so I own Informed Investor, which was previously Juno, and New Zealand Property Investor magazine, because I wanted to engage with those normal property investors, the 45 to 55 year olds. But actually what I've realized is who we're the best fit for is people that just want a hands-off approach. So a lot of my customers, they make really good money doing a particular, so I work with a lot of doctors or lawyers, some engineers overthink this shit out of everything, but people that earn really, really good money that know their worth and just want to keep doing their job. Similarly though, I work with a lot of people that just make they're making a normal wage, and they're kind of getting by, but they realize they're easier people to work with. They realize if they don't do something, they're fucked. They don't have a whole lot of options. The richer you are, the more options you have, and the harder it can be to make a decision sometimes, which I think is where people like engineers who make good money and overanalyze the shit out of everything, often they won't be as successful in investing as someone who might be a teacher and a cop, earning a normal wage, but willing to do something and listen.
I also think, and I've hung on to this mentality throughout my whole career, is not being the most intelligent person that's ever existed sometimes can do you favors.
Oh, it's worked for me.
Yeah, it's worked for me a lot.
It often reminds me that I'm the dumbest person in the company when it comes to any kind of education. And he's like, makes no sense that you're successful.
Yeah.
I think that just being ballsy enough to take a risk works. That's what works for me. Or being smart enough to realise you don't know any better, so you've got to get advice. That works really well for people. The problem with Kiwi mentality is we're DIYers, right?
Yeah.
You'll probably see this at marketing, I'm sure. We see it in our space. But, you take anyone who thinks that they can build a deck, they're going to do it themselves and they're going to fuck it up and it's going to be all wonky, but they're going to do it anyway because DIY is in our blood, right? I'm of the opinion that if there's someone better at something than me at something, I'm going to employ them to do it for me. Yeah. Or even if I just don't want to do something nowadays. So you and I were talking before we came on here about just kind of the things that happen around my home now to make my life easier so that I can be switched on when it comes to parenting, when it comes to running my business, when it comes to just relaxing. Yeah. Because if I come home at the weekend and the house is a mess and I know I need to do the gardening. I've never done gardening in my life, but for example, right, then I'm not going to enjoy myself and I don't get a lot of downtime. So I want to make sure that when I do get downtime, I can be as present as my ADHD brain can allow me.
Yeah. Look, I one of the worst, and you'll think this is ridiculous when I say it out loud. I feel stupid saying it, but I go through these periods of feeling like I should just work harder and I should just I've got this get shit done based mentality, which I need to do everything I possibly can because I'll take on every project, I'll try to do everything and I'll do everything really badly. So I had Michaela, who was one of the admins here, and I sort of trained her as my PA, and over time she got ace, really good. She didn't even come in to do that. And so then what I decided was, because the team needed more operational support, I would gift them Michaela, and it was good for her because it gives her kind of a little bit of a promotion, I suppose you could say. But because I had this person who was trained, who'd spent a lot of time with me, although I'd gift her to the team, which is great because she's had a really positive impact on the team. I should have never got rid of my PA. It's the dumbest thing, because then you wind up and I've just read this book that's really highlighted this for me, but you're kind of playing different levels in business is the way that I look at it. And kind of level 1 is getting the admin work off your plate.
Yes.
Then level 2 might be a little bit more complex. It might be some of the delivery stuff or something like that. And then level 3 might be the marketing, and level 4 might be sales, and level 5 might be leadership. If you just imagine it like that as an example. If I'm playing level 5, where I'm trying to create a senior leadership team and do things like that, without actually having level 1 solved,
you're
just in purgatory because you can't move forwards because you're stuck. You're being pulled back by this thing. So anyway, it turns out it's a really good time to hire a EA.
Absolutely.
Because we put a job ad up on Monday for one.
4,000 applicants?
Mate, crazy applicants, so overqualified, so capable. So I'm really excited to bring that back in because I think that will make a really big difference.
I think because you've got such limited time in a day or in life, you want to really be sensible with how you allocate your time. And if you try and do everything, and if you're spinning plates, that's when you start to let people down or you fuck things up. So the number of times, so I'll give you an example. So a couple of weeks ago, I was at home on a Friday night and I thought to myself, shit, I need to order some Apple AirPods. And my daughter has this very annoying habit of taking one out and dropping it in water. So I'm like, I know what I'll do. I'll buy 10 sets of them. So I jump online. Lauren said to me, don't you want to get Candace to do that? I was like, I can do this. I've got this. I'm like, how hard is it to do this? I log on to Harvey Norman, Noel Lemon, whatever the fuck, and I find the ones that I like, the right shape for me, and I order 10 of them. And they arrive. I ordered 10 of the chargers, not 10 of the things. So now they've been sitting in my car for a month. Because I tried to do something myself, and I'm not that detailed guy when it comes to reading all that stuff. I looked at the picture and go, yeah, that's the one. Now, someone like Candace in my life runs everything. She makes my flights. She gets my flights. I basically wake up, I look at what my diary says, and I go to that place, or I click onto that Zoom link, I have that meeting, and it allows me to be much better because I'm not stressing about the fact that I've got a flight to book and I need to change that round. And if you want to perform at any kind of high level, you need to have that kind of support.
Yeah, and I'm exactly, and then also just that, I mean, having a baby, like you will know the same way as I know, it has a really big impact on your partner, and like that, you know, they go through a lot and neither of you are sleeping and all these things like that. And so then you're trying to be like a reasonable support person for them. But then as soon as it hits 8 a.m. on Monday morning, you're the support person for me, it's 20, for you, it's 90 people. And so then you get home and then it's turning back on, putting the dad hat back on.
Trying to smile and trying to care about the day without getting grumpy. Yeah.
And it makes it so much harder. And so I think just like having some people that are instilled around you, I told you I'm going to look at doing some form of a nanny or something along those lines as well. Having something like that in place at home, having something like that in place at work, someone that's supporting Jen when I'm not there so she can go to the gym and do the stuff that's important to her. Cause I just think the more, and we're also obviously both very in privileged positions to be able to make these decisions and just act on it. But I think you work real hard to get to that position. Why would you then just continue to suffer when you would be better and probably earn more money than it would cost and have a better quality of life at the same time?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think also sometimes when you spend money, it forces you to go and make more. So I'll give you an example. When the Christchurch earthquakes hit, and I was a mortgage broker, and basically I didn't have any business to do in Christchurch because properties weren't transacting. You couldn't get insurance on properties. It was a nightmare, and banks were really dubious. I decided, okay, I'm going to really ramp up my Wellington presence. I was already working in Wellington. I'd worked with a property investment company there that I was doing their mortgages for their clients. And what I'd do is every week I would jump on a plane on a Wednesday. I'd get the first flight in, and then 2 days later I would get a flight back. Yep. Now I'd spend, it was brutal sometimes on my flights. The accommodation in Wellington was really expensive, or was really expensive for me at the time. So I might have been $2,000 down a week just doing that, and then plus office and stuff like that. But what that forced me to do is go and make $4,000. So I'd be there and I'd be hustling. I'd do more work there in a couple of days than I'd do in the rest of my week because I was spending money and I was being forced to make more money to make it worthwhile.
Yeah, I agree. And then also, I mean, this is a terrible example, but myself earlier in my days, I'm a car person. And so I've probably taken some bigger gambles than I should have when it's come to buying cars. And I've stretched a little bit for that. And I've learned some lessons about that along the way that we can touch on another time. But that brought the best out of me. And I don't think anyone would get that, but just knowing that there's like, and now cars, I'm not thinking about payments or anything like that. But at the time I was conscious of, next 20th rolls around, I've got this extra $1,000 that needs to go here or whatever it is. I need to go make that work. I found staff have done the same thing to me. Every time I put another staff member in, I'm like, oh, that means we've got to earn this much more income to offset it. And then the money arrives because you go and make it happen afterwards. You have to be responsible to a certain extent, but you also have to take some risks and push the boundaries a little bit.
Yeah, and also, I talk about work-life balance and, trying to get that right. I've got a lot better than I previously was, but it's just in me that I have to take a certain amount of risk to satisfy myself.
To feel alive.
And so, at the moment we've got to a point where I'm working, I might do kind of 50-ish hours a week, which is a lot less than I did previously. Most of my work life I was probably working 60, 70, 80 hours a week, particularly when I was a mortgage broker. Let's say it's 50 nowadays, and it's, it's a bit more flexible. Like if I'm going to work with customers at night, I'll do that from home. Right? So now I've decided, I know what I'll do. I'll start another business. But having said that, we've also gone through a major consolidation phase at the company as well. We used to do a lot of extra stuff. So I remember in Michael Hill's book, one of his quotes, and I'll butcher it, but it was basically sell something to everyone. So if you go to Michael Hill Jewelers, you can buy a $30,000 engagement ring or a $10 set of earrings, right? And I'm like, we need to be thinking like that. So that's why we have a magazine. That's why we've got property management. That's why we've got mortgages and insurance. That's why we've got more affordable properties for people to buy. We tried to be everything, but then also I wanted to be a solution for people that wanted to have an active strategy, people who wanted to do renovations. And so we started that with started a subsidiary business with a great lady, Elsa Wolf, who's awesome at what she does, but our business model wasn't that. And so all of a sudden now we're just becoming brand confusing. Yeah. And as a result, we're not giving that part of the business the effort that we should if we're committed to being in a business partnership. Yeah. So we've really gone through some realization in the last wee while. There's some changes coming for one last business or one last part of our business in the next wee while, and then we're pretty good, and no additional things.
Yeah. It's just that if you're a little bit wired to be a bit hyperactive and you like a little bit of risk, it's hard to turn it down.
Now I tend to do that with outside investments.
Yep.
So I will put seed capital into something. Today I've got lunch with a guy who's got a really interesting business concept, which is a drinks business. I know nothing about it other than I've got some good business sense, and so we're going to talk through some stuff there and an investment. I invest in a meat creation business. So they take again, way smarter than me. A girl, one of my best friends from high school days. She, as a scientist, came up with a way of taking the cells from meat and creating meat. So real meat from cells, and in a very efficient way. So I'm invested in that. There's another thing that I'm looking at the moment in the health and wellness space. So I'm always looking at other things, but nowadays I'll do them in a much more passive way.
Yeah, right. Interesting. No longer putting in sweat equity. It's more,
Correct.
Yeah, there's only so much to give. What are and we're sort of coming towards a little bit more of the end of this episode. What are some of the lessons that you've learned going through the process of building Opes Partners? Obviously not wearing too many hats is one of them, but what are some other things that have come up as you've been through this journey?
I think that having laser focus and knowing what your product is or your service is and not getting distracted is a really important thing. That's been... For example, one part of the business at the moment costs us kind of somewhere to the tune of 200 to 300 grand a year just to keep the doors open for that part of the business.
Yeah.
Now, that's probably not a very good business idea. Yeah. But we kind of did it because it was a bit of an ego decision to start that. And as a result, other parts of the business suffer because we take focus, particularly Ed's focus, away from the core business to spend some time on that. And we're giving money to that, whereas we should be using that to develop the software that we want to develop. So I think one of the things that I've learned is to be much better at that and more considered with our decision making. Don't just go buy a magazine in COVID, for example. Now we've got an advisory board and we meet 4 times a year in Queenstown and we go through everything. And I am big on involving everyone being part of the decision making in terms of the senior leadership. So there's me, Ed and Ollie, we're the shareholders of the business, and then we've got 2 external business advisors, then we've got our CFO and some managers within the team and another business partner in the mortgage and insurance part of the business. Now everyone at that table has an equal vote at all times in my mind. And anyone can say anything about what they're feeling about a direction we're going, because I think it's really important to take guidance from the people that you surround yourself with, but also have really good people around you. I need to be successful, as successful as possible. I need running buddies. I don't want to be rich by myself. That nothing would bore me more than being rich alone. So I've got 2 business partners in the group, and then another one for the insurance and mortgage business. And we work together to make the business profitable and valuable. And I like that. I would rather give shares away and have business partners than try and do it all myself.
Yeah, interesting. That's really interesting because I'm a 100% shareholder of Digital Simple, and I've thought at times that I'm in too deep now to change that because it But yeah, it would just need to be the right person.
I think
That's
that we're basically a closed shop now, or we are a closed shop now. When Ed came on board, he made it clear in no uncertain terms he wanted to be an owner of the business. And so what we did is we put together a strategy based on milestones. You get shares allocated to you and or purchased, and that gave him something to work towards, but it gave me comfort that I had him there as a long-term business partner because we didn't know each other. We were a year in business working together. I didn't know whether or not he was going to stay. I didn't know whether or not our personalities would clash. I didn't know how great it would be a business partnership until I'd gone through that, and so having a structure where you release shares or you buy out shares over a period of time, I think is a really smart way of doing it.
Yeah, interesting.
You're dating before you're getting married.
Yeah. There's always merit to that. I've got a real time. I'll just throw a scenario out there. Example it has nothing to do with me. That's not why I'm asking the question. Maybe it has something to do with me. I'll let you decide. So I'm looking at buddying up with a couple of people that what they do sits very closely to what we do, taking a small shareholding in what they do, and to help them flesh out their product and bring what we do to that as well. So they do a lot of work in, say, like the content production side of things. They have no extra product they sell in terms of what do people do with that content once they get it. They've got a huge customer base. They've got a really successful business at the moment. And they're both also stuck in having really high-paying jobs where they're a little bit more while they're doing the 80-hour weeks. They're making good income, but they're stuck in that, and so they've never been through the process of hiring staff before, doing anything like that. I'm interested as to your thoughts in terms of, because I'm not doing the business that has nothing to do with marketing thing before. I've done that, cost me a lot of money. But when it's so close to what you do, and it's in more of like you guys still run it, I just want to come in and help you hire the right people and add some upsells and things like that. Is that more your kind of style?
I would. I like to be all in most of the time. Like if I were going to do something like that, it would probably be that we'd dance a little bit and then we'd do a merger. So we're looking at something at the moment which is kind of similar. So there's a part of our business which we're unhappy with the performance of it at the moment. So what we've done is we've gone out and found the guy in the industry that I think is a really good fit for our culture, but also awesome at that job.
Yeah.
And he has a very successful business in his own right. So we caught up for a drink the other day and I was like, I want us to do something together. What would that look like for you? And he's a bit older. He obviously needs a succession plan. So we're looking at taking a kind of maybe a 25% position in his business next year. And then we'll start trialing out being together. And then over the course of the next 3 years, we'll buy out that business in its entirety. And because I think we can be greater together. Now, in that case, he wants to retire at some stage. He's still relatively young, but he's getting closer to retirement. So that is a great option for him because he'll make more money and he's got a guaranteed buyer. It's great for us because we fixed the problem that we've just now got a kick-ass person in business already embedded in our company, and we can grow that to something great. Having said that, in your situation, I think the benefit that you would get from partnering would be that now you've got someone else who's got the same desired outcome, i.e. make this business more successful, that now you're collaborating with, and I think that's really important. So it's all good to go and talk to your friends or your business colleagues, or go to a networking thing and talk about your businesses, and people say, I saw this happen, or I did this and it worked. It's very, very different when you put your money on the line and now you're doing it together. And I do think people are just are more successful if they've got other successful people around them pushing them to be better, and you're collaborating. And partnerships are hard because people bring such different skill sets a lot of the time that inevitably you get to a position like I've had business partners in the past where they might do something, they might not be doing as much, for example, as what you think you're doing. And that can build resentment. So you've got to have really clear lines of communication, like any relationship, of this is what I'm going to bring to the table, this is what you're going to bring to the table. And then you also just realize that collectively you're making more money together and you're being wealthier together. So sometimes it will never be a fair balance.
Yeah, and that's impossible to achieve. We've actually done, and just touching on it, I've set up an advisory board as well. So I've got my first meeting 5th of next month,
Cool.
I think it is for that. And that's just, I'd realised the value of like real advice. Like I'd had business coaches and stuff like
But
that.
business coaches are a pain in the ass most of the time
Yeah.
because half of them have never run a fucking business in their life. Like I like people that have actually done something, right?
And that was sort of how it happened. Was I started. Someone had said to me, and he's fucking awesome. He's so good. And we'd just been away one time together, and he was like, if you ever wanted to have lunch and just chat through some of your problems, I'd be happy to do that. I was like, oh fuck, okay, this is someone who really knows his shit, So I was like, right, okay. And so we got back, and I was like, I'll take you up on that if that's okay. And he's like, cool. And so came in and did that, and then he's like, do you want to catch up again? And I was like, yeah, that'd be great. And then we sort of caught up 4 or 5 times, and all of a sudden I've got the senior leadership team that he got me to set up, and a few other things are happening. And
awesome.
Then I'm like, I need to reach out to this guy because he'll know something. So I'm talking to him too. And then my business partner changed our accountants. Sorry, my business advisor. He was like, you need to change accountants based on what I'm seeing. So this is my accountant. He's not really actively looking for any extra clients. I'll put in a good word, and hopefully he'll be. So anyway, now that accountant is joining the advisory board as
Awesome.
well. And so you've got all these people involved where you're like, these people are infinitely smarter than I am when it comes to this stuff. And also just like, there's some money in it for them because you pay them and you do all that sort of thing. But like, pretty passionate about just seeing the business do, like it's not that much. They don't need the 400 an hour or whatever it is,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We've got 2 external advisors. One of them in particular is, I imagine, incredibly wealthy.
Yeah.
Like he would be, I imagine he'd be rich lister wealthy. And we pay him a stipend to help us out.
Yeah.
And we get so much value out of it. But what I've realized is it's not about the money for a lot of these successful people. They're successful on their own right. They've just got to a point in their life where they want to give back, and where they look at particularly some young people who are just trying to make it in the business world, and they want to help navigate that and give back. So there is amazing help out there. Often you just got to ask people.
Yeah. Yeah, and I didn't know that. I thought you just had to go to a business coach. Like you said, that's first business was their business coaching business, and you're getting advice out of a textbook, which is, until you know what it's like to pay your stuff on a fucking credit card, or so you don't know what it's like. You don't know that feeling. You don't know the sitting in your room and you're like, I don't know how the fuck I'm going to figure this one out. And like that first moment where you don't know the answer, and you can't learn that.
No,
not hands-on.
That's where, again, the running mates for me. I remember in the COVID times, I'm pretty sure Ollie said to me at one stage, he's like, man, or maybe it was Ed, he said, I can't believe you're so positive in that time, like we're getting out of it. Like, how did you know it was going to work out? I was like, holy shit, I didn't think it was going to work out. I didn't know what the fuck was going to happen. We just put on a brave face every day. And having someone else that's going through that with you, you talk each other down off a ledge, which is great.
Yeah, interesting. Well, it's something I'll definitely consider because like I said, 100% shareholding. I've kind of kept it because our plan is probably exit at some point. It's years away. It's not months away. But I've just held on to it for that. But I suppose if you bring someone on board that adds value, who cares?
Hey, who cares? You come up with the number that you want to achieve or the value add that they might bring, and then you make that part of the agreement.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. Hey, kind of like a closing question we asked every guest. If you were to go back and be 18-year-old Andrew again, you could do it all over exactly the same way, but you could change one thing or do one thing differently. What do you think it would be? It usually gets this response. It challenges thought.
I should have from my
I think looking back, probably the financial decision I regret most was not being braver with some of my investment decisions. So I've done pretty well. But when I was investing originally in property, I was very narrow focused. I only invested in Christchurch, and when the Christchurch earthquakes hit and properties were hard to sell, they were hard to insure, and there were damage, there were times that I thought maybe I was fucked. Maybe I was going to end up backwards on this. Now, if I had had that happen, that would have been okay. I was young. I would have come back from that. But my mistake was not diversifying enough.
Yeah.
And certainly in business at that stage, I had some contacts in Wellington. I was doing a bit of business in Wellington. But again, I had a lot of concentration risk. Yeah. Now, nowadays, I've still got a lot of concentration risk. Don't get me wrong. Everything that I touch has to be something to do with property. That's my jam.
Yeah.
Right? So there's concentration risk, but I've put more mechanisms in place, like having an office in Auckland as well as Christchurch, sure. Like having staff outside of those two areas as well, so that if some event outside of my control stops me being able to operate in a particular area, I can still carry on running a business. Yeah. I remember when the earthquakes hit, we were laughing about this the other day. Back then, you'd have a physical server in your office that when the earthquakes hit and you couldn't get power to that, you couldn't log in and do your job.
Yeah.
And so I think the risks that I didn't take were going to Auckland sooner, investing in Auckland sooner. And so if I could go back to make more money, I would do that.
Yeah, right. Cool. What's next for you and Opes?
I think one of the big focuses for the next 2 years is to really embrace tech a lot more.
Yep.
I think I said before, we've got about $500,000 budget a year for tech development. Mm-hmm. We've just built our software, which basically takes all the tools that we were using with spreadsheets and put it online to make it easier for customers to navigate, but also to give us a lot more insight into what people want. So with a spreadsheet, people use it and then they might not understand something, but you don't know that. With tech, with an online platform, you can have more interactions with them around getting reported bugs or getting suggestions, and people have some great suggestions sometimes as well. We really want to build New Zealand's and maybe internationally the best property investment software that's out there, and we want it to be able to do things for people that aren't possible at the moment. For example, using AI to map out what your ability might look like and what your wealth might look like in the future. So at the moment, we require financial advisors to model that out. The problem with human beings is we make mistakes. Mm-hmm. And so even I might enter something in incorrectly, even after doing it for so many years, and not pick it up in a plan. And that makes me nervous, that one client we might actually cock up and give bad advice to. Yep. So what I want to do is use AI to kind of be a bit of a safety net to do this, and then we oversee it as well, and then we help implement the plans. Because then I think we can reach more people and help more Kiwis invest in property and actually understand what the plan looks like and hold them accountable.
Yeah. I'm convinced I can automate our entire business. And I'm going to do it outside of Digital Simple, because even if we could, a lot of our Digital Simple customers wouldn't want us to. They like the way we do things. Yeah. But that then allows us to work with the 95% of businesses in New Zealand that don't have staff and aren't big enough to pay a big retainer to an agency every month and that sort of thing. AI will be, and my thoughts on it change almost bi-weekly at the moment, where I went from it being a sort of fun play around tool you could use to being like,
make a poem.
This could be, we could be living in the launch of the internet all over again, but bigger, and not even realize it. And I think a lot of people are sort of like, because the interesting thing with AI is the growth curve changes. Because with the internet, it goes up steadily because it's fed by humans, but with AI, it eventually hits a point where it's able to grow itself, and then it becomes exponential, and that hasn't, I don't think, been considered by a lot of people.
So I, because I'm not much of a tech guy, I like you, used it, played around with a couple of things. We've used it for, we use it daily in the company at the moment, but not to its full extent yet. And we're wanting to embrace it more. When Marcus Sheridan came to New Zealand this year to be part of our conference, our annual conference, he and I were having a conversation over dinner about it. And I respect his opinion immensely. And I asked him, how big is AI going to be? And he said, it is going to be the equivalent of fire in the wheel. It is going to change the world.
Yeah.
And they're big on embracing that and helping businesses understand how you can use those tools.
Yeah, it's not just leverage. That's the thing that's changed for me. It's not just leverage. It's the pre-leverage.
And people are scared about it because they think it's going to cost them their job. One of our staff the other day, when we announced the AI features, said, I can retire now because she's worried about her job, which is crazy because we will just find other ways to make best use of our time. We're now going to take out some of that shit that you don't want to do, and we're going to have, again, we're going to make your advice better, not take away a job. And I think that if people are out there listening to this thinking, yeah, AI is a bit scary, I'm worried it's going to cost me my job, you will adapt. Yeah. People do adapt. The Industrial Revolution showed us this. People then were like the equivalent of AI, thinking it's going to cost us our jobs. That's not how we're resilient as human beings, and we will adapt.
And the entire economy is based on people having jobs. You couldn't just remove that. And this is
whether you like it or not, it's happening.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, if someone's listened to this, I'm sure they've loved it if they've gotten to this point. Where can they find you? Where can they learn more about you? If they feel like one of your customers, what's the route they should go down?
Our website is a great source of anything property investment. So opespartners.co.nz. If you want to contact me, my details are on there. Our podcast is a great way of learning a bit more about us. A Property Academy podcast, daily podcast, and we've done it for 5 years, and we'll do at least another 5 years.
Nice. Hey, thank you so much for coming. I've really enjoyed it. I hadn't heard your story before. Really cool. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for listening. And we'll see you on the next one. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks.
Cheers, mate.